Hey everyone, today I have Megan Ely with me. She's the owner of OFD Consulting and a wedding pro education expert. And we had an amazing conversation about PR, how to prepare yourself to start pitching your services and your expertise. She had amazing strategies for you. We went very granular in what you should do, the steps you should take to start thinking about your PR as part of your strategy for your business. And we talked about how part of it is having a clear understanding of your vision and your expertise. But I think a big part of it as well is your confidence, making sure that you are confident to be reaching out to these resources, to be putting information out there, and to present yourself as the expert, which we know you are. I have a great resource for you guys, and I'm going to link it in the show notes. How to Boost Your Confidence workbook is a resource they can use with very concrete strategies to boost your confidence by doing small steps and small work every day. So I can't wait for you to utilize that and start working your PR strategies with the resources and tips that Megan gave it to you. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Accidental CEO podcast, where we bridge the gap between the creativity you love and the CEO mindset you need. I'm your host, Nada Salvatore, wedding photographer and business educator. Find full show notes and resources at accidentalceopod.com. Let's get into today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Accidental CEO podcast. I have Megan Ely with me today. She's the owner of OFD Consulting and a wedding pro education expert. I'm so excited to talk to her. I know she has lots to contribute to you guys, a lot of tips, strategies, and concepts that you can utilize right away in your industry. So welcome, Megan.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so tell them a little bit about where you are and what do you do. And then we'll dive into the story of how you ended up where you are today.
So I am myself a wedding publicist. I'm the owner of OFD Consulting. I've been doing it 15 years. I'm essentially a publicist for the wedding and events industry. So I'm very niche down. We're based in Richmond, Virginia, which is just, you know where that is. But to those who don't have a map right in front of them, it's just a couple hours south of DC. But we service people all over the US and also in Western Europe in particular.
Very good. So tell us, how did you ended up in PR? Because I know there was something different you used to do before that.
And I love the concept of accidental because when it comes to that, because I'm like, I sort of was an accidental CEO myself. So originally I was in events. I will tell you, I trained in PR. I went to school for PR. I always had a long love of media relations. But I also had a pull towards the wedding industry. I know it sounds very common, but you see how fun everyone is having in the industry. You think that could be me too. And so I dove into the world of venues and catering for quite some time, for many years. And I realized that you and I talked offline. I had earlier aspirations to be an event planner and then made the decision, there were a lot of gaps in the industry for people representing themselves. And so I decided to jump into the world of publicity. Now, that was not accidental. What was accidental was that I started OFD 2 years earlier than expected. I just accepted a director of catering job, very well paid, after a careful vetting. We're in the middle of it was the 2009 financial crises, but it was a good time for me to move. And we'll keep nice and polite about it and just say after 3 weeks, it was very clearly not a fit. So I put in my 2 weeks notice, which mortified me. And I went right into the job market looking. But one of my good friends, Heather, said, well, what if you started OFD earlier than expected? And I said, well, that's not the plan. That's not the plan. I need 2 years. And she's like, why do you need 2 years? And I had to really overcome all the practical sides of why I shouldn't start it early and decided to start. So I became accidental in 2009.
So I want to dig into that a little bit because I feel like a lot of us have started our businesses maybe because we're, somehow pushed out or got a little kick on the behind and it's time to go by either somebody who actually wanted us to go and do this and believed in us, or maybe because we were in a bad situation like you were. So you had this idea that you needed 2 years to work through things. So what was in your mind? Tell me a little bit more. What did that look like from a plan standpoint? Why did you feel like you needed 2 years? And then how did you overcome all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really appreciate that thoughtful question. So It all came down to finances. At the time, 2009, I was 28, so young. I felt 20s was young to be starting something. I was also engaged. Now, spoiler, I'm married to my husband of many a year, 15 years later, but we had just bought a house and I had just come off of a hotel job, which paid the bills, but I had just accepted a lucrative director of catering. I mean, I would have been one of the best paid directors of catering at 28 in anywhere in Richmond. And so for me, I said, we were about to pay for a wedding. We had just bought a house. I mean, the timing was pretty terrible for all of this. And so I thought to myself, why don't I take 2 years at this job? I looked at the numbers. It was going to be paying six figures, which 15 years ago, that was pretty sizable. I thought, why don't I still act like I make this and save all this money so that I can start my company with 6 months of bills? That's what it came down to. Of course, now looking back, I probably should have also said to myself, you also don't know how to own a business. I think I was just so financially minded, right? But there were other reasons, like now at my age, I would have said, well, there's a lot of reasons I shouldn't have started it. But it really came down to finances and wanting to I'll be honest, not be a burden on my new husband. He didn't see it like that, but I did. And so to your question of how I overcame it is, I was sitting at this opportunity where I was offered a full-time medical sales job, which I think I know that's very competitive, but I think I could have done well at. And I talked to Travis, that's my husband now, and we looked at the numbers and someone had offered me a decent part-time job and we looked at the numbers and he's like, "Why don't I kind of carry it a little bit which I had to really take a big slice of humble pie. It was really mindset. Now that I'm looking back, I feel like this is a therapy session, but it was a mindset, for me and to be okay with that. And once we crunched the numbers, I'm a statistics girly, so I need to look at something and say, okay, this could make sense because when you look at how much I'd make with a part-time job and my bills, it was negative. And so once we came up with a plan that we could all be comfortable with, and he was 1,000% supportive, he believed in me more than I could. I think it was getting over that mindset. We had some money saved and really just trusting. I am a diligent hard worker. There's not a single person. I'm sure people have different opinions about any of us, right? But everyone will always say that I work very hard. And so I just had to lean into that, accept that job that was 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. every day. I negotiated contracts for hotels and associations, which is perfect based on my background. And that's how it happened. I must do a shout out to the state of Virginia. At the time, Virginia was I don't know if it still is, but it was one of the top states to start a small business. So I was given a lot of low cost and free resources.
Oh, nice.
Score, there was this great organization called Score that's national. Virginia had a lot of things too. So all of that came together. But I think the biggest thing, and I've never thought of it, but it was my mindset.
Yes, welcome to the club.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's at the end of the day is the huge, it's a huge mindset shift, like you said, in combination with, I think, some strategies and understanding where you are. Like you said, financially, you want it to be a little bit more safe and secure and have that, which is not a bad plan. I actually saved a year's worth of expenses before I quit my job and, went into the wedding industry because that was my number one excuse not to do it. I was like, well, what if I can help support the household and, and help pay the bills? And my husband's very supportive as well, but could not have actually done it by himself. So it wasn't an option. Even if he wanted to, it wasn't an option with kids and daycare and all that. So, it was like, okay, if that's the number one fear or, excuse or fear, whatever you want to call it, let's make a plan to take care of that. So I wrote it down. I saved a year's worth of expenses. So there was no hesitation. If I stepped out of my industry and didn't book a single client for a whole year, we will be okay. I would still be able to take care of my family and feel like I'm contributing. But the thought of not being able to help and contribute to your family is scary.
It was hard, and I've gotta give you kudos because for me, it was myself and Travis, and it was it was a great, reasonable, modest first home, no kids. My cats did have a life they aspired to be, but they were pretty modest with what their needs, and so I thought to myself, another mindset was like, "What do I have to lose now versus 10 years from now?" I'm in my 40s now, and I think I don't know if I'd make the same leap right away. I'd have a lot more trepidation because there's a lot more reliance on me now.
Yeah, when you have a lot more to lose and a lot more things to think about, it's harder. But again, and then you mentioned not having the knowledge to start your own business. And even though I feel like yes, that's great and important, at the end of the day, should that really be something to keep us from starting? Because, I don't think so. I would say go for it.
Apparently it didn't for me. I was, like, ready to go. No, I think and I'm sure you and I both can agree we had transferable skills from what we were doing before, So I guess maybe that's why it didn't hit me. It's like, well, if I can run these six-figure holiday parties, like, what's a small bit? I was humbled to that, but you're right. I think there's just such great information out there that people can latch onto and really learn a lot at a low cost.
So let's go back to PR in the wedding industry.
I was gonna say, I love this therapy session. We can take in more if you want. No, I'm just kidding.
Fine, anytime. I love that. So, what was the gap that you saw in the wedding industry that made you think, we're missing something here. Let me jump in and try to help out?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I have such a love of the wedding industry. I often say that one of the loves of my life, in addition to my family, is the wedding industry. I just loved working with wedding professionals and working in venues. I worked in full service venues for the most part. I was business first. I didn't see myself as creative and artistic. I'm not. That's not my side of the brain, right? And a lot of my friends and colleagues, they had such amazing work. I mean, cakes and linens and planners and photographers and their art was number 1, and I thought to myself, "Gosh, there's some businessy things here missing. There are gaps." I mean, bear in mind the time, right? 2009. So you had Baby Style Me Pretty, you had Bride's Cafe, some of the originals, and no one knew what to do with them. Do I submit? Do I not? Like, people had gorgeous work, and people didn't know about it outside of yes, advertising is a great way to get your name out there. I would never deny that. But I just saw gaps, and I saw that there were people who didn't understand that promotion needed to be something they prioritized more day to day, and I think given the time too, being in the industry in that 2007 through 2009, it was a recession. I mean, plain and simple, and you saw people either losing business, going out of business, or coming close to it. So the thought was, I could come in and show people I could empower them to really represent their work.
I really like that, understanding that, yes, your work can be great and your art can be great, but if nobody's seeing it, you're not helping yourself, right?
And we saw at the end of the day, all of these great, blogs were starting to come, and it was just such a game changer. It was like, wait a minute. Yes, the Knot was around, local magazines, but now we could actually have more online opportunity to increase that social proof. And I just wanted to jump in.
Let's talk a little bit about beyond that paid advertising option. What else is out there for people to consider from a PR standpoint? How to get themselves out there, how to be more seen, more available, and be in front of their clients more often?
Absolutely. So when it comes to PR means a lot of things. PR means getting published in event space, but for small businesses, creatives, so and so forth as well. And so I tell people there's a few different ways to go depending on what they do for a living. There is, of course, always for those in events, there are event features, being able to take gorgeous events and showcase them to blogs and publications. But any creative, any small business owner, they can benefit from features about their company. They could do write-ups about their company. There could be quotes. I was just working on this really interesting one this week about the trend of pickleball in events. And so, like, I know you heard it here probably first. And so it's people being quoted, imagery being used, couples, so on and so forth. If we want to be meta for a second, it's going to be podcast interviews. Some people, depending their market, it's radio and TV still. I'd probably squeeze in, speaking engagements as well, but that's kind of iffy if that falls under media or not. And I would say finally too, for the creatives who have products, all of those gift guides, not everyone's going to get to the Oprah's favorite list, but there are plenty of ways that people can have roundups for their products and services as part of, graduation gift roundups and Mother's Day, Father's Day, so and so forth. And so PR itself, which really is its own separate entity, but there are plenty of ways that you can get seen in the media without actually paying for placement or message.
We'll dive into that a little bit more later. I want to talk more about the process of building and maintaining some relationships with like media outlets and journalists and why these relationships can be very critical for your success in PR.
It really is. At the end of the day, the success of public relations lies in part, and it's a few things. It's the quality pitches, but it also lies in part with just these editorial relationships. Now, I want to say that the main benefits are if you start working with someone long enough and they trust you, whether it's an editor, writer, they know you can be the go-to. You're going to always be on time, if not early. You're going to give the right content. You're not going to be a pain in the butt to work with. I mean, that's a big part of it as well, right? That you have the content and you're very reliable. What we find is they're going to keep coming back to you for assistance. We talk about pickleball, for example, and some of these. I have this one writer this week who it's several things for the New York Post and another for the New York Times. And what's great about that is that these people who I've worked with for quite a long time, sometimes many years, they trust me at this point. They know that I'm reliable. They know that if we don't have a fit, we're going to tell them right away. We'll do our very best to give them everything they need. They don't have to worry about quality. And so when people are looking to represent themselves, I often say, I would rather it be a slow move for someone to really take time to develop the right media contacts because it leads to quality results. I think it's imperative. Now, I will say real quick as well that because people come to me and they say, well, we want someone with the relationships. And I'll say, well, listen, yes, we do have relationships, but we certainly, there are other, like, if we're pitching to the media, editors, writers, if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. It doesn't matter if we get along really well and we talk about our cats all the time on the side for email. Like it has to be the right fit. So I do stop people. Sometimes we have prospects that I would discourage them for signing up because there's like a misunderstanding here that you might give me this event or this content that just isn't a fit. And I'm not going to try and push it on a writer just because I know them. And I think that's why we have such good relationships is the editors and writers know we're never going to purposely reach out to them sending something that is an ill fit.
How does somebody go into a relationship with somebody in the media? How do you know who to reach out to? How do you reach out to them? Just talk a little bit about that because it's something that we hear all the time as a great resource and something we should do. But like, how do you get to that?
That's a great question. When it comes to finding the people, there's a few different ways that you can do it. And I hate to take a step back, but bear with me for a second. You need to start with establishing your PR goals, right? Like before you start seeking people out, PR can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming to find new editors and writers new to you, I should say. But if you start by setting your goals, where you think you'd be a good fit, what has to happen for this to be a success, what it does is it helps guide you a little bit more versus just throwing yourself out there trying to figure it out. And so I would encourage people to start there. And so if you're someone who says, I'd really want to be in X, Y, and Z magazines, I really want these local publications, these podcasts, whatever that is to whoever, is thinking about this, what they're going to do is one of the best ways to get connected to writers and editors is to first understand what your area of expertise is. What are you best at? What could you speak on? Are you a pickleball expert? Are you an expert at photography? Are you an expert at X, Y, and Z? Then what you're going to do is I'd say come up with 3 to 5 outlets that would be a good match for your brand, right? Start there. Start small. Like I'd rather go quality over quantity. Start with 3 to 4 places and go and take a look. And you're going to see different sections of these publications, of these blogs where they talk about destination events. They talk about entrepreneurship, whatever the field is for those folks. And you're going to see that regularly that there are freelance writers there and staff writers who write for these publications who might be a brand match. So if I thought to myself, I'd love to be quoted more as a publicist, like in the PR realm, right? What I would do is maybe I would say Forbes, entrepreneur. Let's say we start with these two. I start looking, say, who's writing about PR these days? Who's writing about publicity these days? And I would land on those writers and start following them on social. So believe it or not, just getting started following them, whether it's X, formerly Twitter, it's going to be Instagram, so and so forth. If they have an email newsletter, following along. Some of them have something called a Substack. And a Substack, that's a newer thing in the world of PR where they are sharing what they're looking to get connected on, sources and so forth. So you can start there, just good old fashioned, roll up your sleeves and research. Now, if you're looking to expedite, if I may for a second, there's a few things that you can do to expedite. One is if you start landing on certain publications that are fit, there are events out there where the media will attend. I mean, in my event space, there are conferences where members of the media are invited. That is one way to get the ball rolling. I have attended and spent thousands of dollars to go to conferences just so I can be at a media breakfast. I mean, I see value in that. But there's also going to be some online places. At the time of this recording, there's something now, it used to be called Haro. It's called Hero now, Help Every Reporter Out. So it is free. And Peter Shankman, who founded originally Haro, which was later purchased, he's restarted it. And it's where journalists actually get connected to sources through like anonymous asks. So I met a lot of journalists back in the day that way. There's something called Quoted, which is QWOTED. It's another free, low cost resource where you can receive PR leads. So there's a few different ways to go. If you want to invest in events, there's some free software, free programs as well. And then it's going to be good old fashioned rolling up your sleeves, fine tuning your goals, and then start asking yourself, well, if I'm great at this, who would benefit from that? And then just start Googling.
That is great. I love all of that. I love when we can actually get a little bit more granular and understand concepts that get thrown around all the time, because we know these things are great, but like, how do you go about even getting started? So I appreciate you sharing that information with us. Let's see. Have you ever had to manage a PR crisis for a client?
You know, here's the thing about PR crisis. I'm really good at it, but I don't want to be. Like, I don't want to be the crisis person. And so I don't offer crisis services. But I win, but I when I do it, I win awards for it. Like I know I'm good at it. Like I'm even keeled. Maybe not my like my business. So yes and no. Nothing extraordinarily crisis. There are crisis PR specialists I will always refer out. I will never take a live crisis because I know I am not as qualified as someone who does it as their job. I'm a firm believer in niching down when it comes to that. So, but I have managed the one that comes to mind, well, of course, there's always the pandemic, right? The first 60 days, we did 100 articles. I mean, you name it, New York Times, People, CNN. It was like having a newborn and not sleeping ever. All I did was work, which I know was the opposite of most of my industry. But the one that comes to mind outside of course, the obvious. So the Zika crisis from a bunch of years ago. So I thought about this where we worked with a destination wedding company, one of the largest ones in the country. And of course, all the places where they have like resorts and everything, like there was a Zika crisis and you were finding people canceling. They had, there were people whose like wedding party, they had people who were pregnant and wouldn't come. Like it was all that. So there were a number of things we did, but the one thing in particular that stands out from all those years ago is the fact of the matter is, even if 90% of their work was in the areas where Zika was, there was 10% that wasn't. And so we leaned in, changed our strategy. We said, why don't we move it over and really focus on these other areas instead? Like this is not working. We're not going to hide from it. Obviously, if we need to speak to it, we can put a spokesperson on it. That's fine. Because I do believe you need to be very upfront when in times of crisis. I talk about that actually a lot in my talks. But what we did is we started working on like roundups with the knot on like I'll never forget, it was like favorite castles in Europe, and we paired it with a lot of places that they did. And so we started moving people around. It's very Don Draper from Mad Men. If you don't like what's being said, change the conversation. And that's what we did. We said, well, we'll focus on the 10% of areas that they can still service right now, and we'll really lean into that.
I am from Brazil, so I remember that very well.
Yes. And so we just had you got to lean into crisis. What I tell people is, if I may say real quick, is the original founders of PR, is some of the best known people were from 1800s and 1900s, and we could learn a lot from them early on where they actually managed the railroad publicity. There's some of the original people who started really doing media relations when there were tragedies and crisis where, there were crashes and stuff. They would actually take the journalists to the crash. Like they brought them right in versus trying to evade it. And so when it comes to crisis, you've got to lean in. And hopefully most of your listeners are not going to have some major train crash in there or like global pandemic or Zika, but there are ways to manage it, but always bring in a true professional for that.
Yeah, but I think that concept can be applied to a lot of things. Like if you don't like the conversation, change the subject. So, whenever we hear a lot of things in whatever industry you are, and people can be negative very easily. It's a lot of people's default is to focus on what's going wrong. So you can take that concept, and even though you don't have a PR crisis to manage, just the concept and the mindset of like changing the narrative and focusing on what can be done instead of what cannot be done. I think it's something we can apply anywhere. So, Hey there, are you a creative professional looking to elevate your business and artistic vision? Discover the transformative power of personalized coaching tailored specifically for creatives like you. During the sessions, I dive into the unique challenges and goals for your specific business, especially as a creative entrepreneur. That's very important because what you do, it is special and it is different than everybody else. You're going to break through some mental barriers and cultivate a mindset that really nurtures the creativity and resilience of your business. We're going to enable you to thrive in both your personal and professional life. That is my goal for you. If you're ready to embark in an amazing journey of one-on-one coaching with me, hop over to accidentalceo.co and let's get you to be the CEO that you're meant to be. So with the rise of digital and social media, that's, a big thing right now. How has your approach to PR changed or evolved? Can you maybe share a success campaign where you utilize some more modern tools?
So with the rise of social media in particular, it has been such a game changer in the last 10 years. What I tell people, and I was telling you I used to teach at a local university, and we always said social media is what happens first, and then it leads to PR for better or for worse when it comes to that, right? And whether it's customer service, putting that out there, so and so forth. And so over the years, when it comes to leveraging social media as it relates to PR, mean, there's a few different ways to go with that, but what really comes to mind is pairing strong social media campaigns, which admittedly not my area of expertise. There's some great people who do that, but for those who are putting themselves out there truly as an expert. So we've worked with a lot of thought leaders in especially the event space. And we will go ahead and submit them to different awards throughout the years. And so we've had people who've won Speaker of the Year, and that campaign is directly related not only to the great press they've shown in the last year, where they've been featured, sharing their expertise, guest articles, podcast interviews, things like that, but also strong social media to show we're teaching on our owned channels as much as we're teaching through the media speaking engagement. So I find that those who are most well-rounded utilizing that channel smartly while also going out and pairing it with PR, we've been very thrilled with over the years some wonderful clients who've won awards as a result of that, knowing that they all tend to work together.
So basically looking at social media as just one of your platforms in your PR campaign.
100%. I always tell people you start there because if you are going to go out and start pitching yourself to writers, forget the awards for a second, just pitching for PR. Those writers, these editors, they have to go back to your owned channels, your website, your blog, your social, and see that you're already an expert at that. So if someone says, I am a destination expert, right? I'm a destination events and so forth, they have to see that you're doing the events, you're highlighting the events, they're in your galleries, you're being featured, and it makes sense. Otherwise, it won't. We had this one in particular years ago, Emily Sullivan, really fabulous out of New Orleans. And she was in charge of she was really known for, I should say, destination weddings from people outside of the area. And she did weddings in New Orleans. And people would come from all over some of the major cities. And so she really in 2017 ish started doing micro weddings before it became a cool thing to do during the pandemic. And so when we started pitching her and she started getting ample pickups, it was very evident from her social, from her blog. Like you could see this is what she did day in and day out. So there was no questioning her authority on the subject.
So going into that a little bit more, when is there a perfect time or a best time for you to start working on your PR? Like how far into your career is that something that you feel like you need to have before you start pitching yourself?
It depends on your area of expertise and what you want to be known for, right? I find that small business owners as a whole, those first 0 to 3 years really focus on networking, getting out there, so and so forth. Really, we start working with people 3 to 5 plus years out. If someone's really eager to be quoted in a lot of places, to guest blog, to be, interviewed, it's like, well, how long have you been doing this to be able to really be that expert? To someone to execute for us events that would make sense in a portfolio to send out as well. Now, that's not to say if someone's starting a business and they're 0 to 3 years, but they have been in the industry for 10 years, myself included, when I first got started with OFD, like baby first year, I was being quoted in the wedding industry because I had been in the wedding industry for 7, 8 years, So it really goes down to expertise. It really goes down to bandwidth as well. Like if someone's going to start, generally they start representing themselves. And so do they have the bandwidth to dedicate 1 to 2 hours a week, maybe to get started, maybe more if they really want to accelerate? And then also resources. I always tell people, listen, if you want to bring in somebody, maybe, maybe not, or there are things that you need to update your site on as well, because I always tell people PR points back to your social, points back to your website. So if that's not where it needs to be, you need to invest in that, because conversion only happens when you've got the right goods when people come to your site or social and so on and so forth. So a lot of things have to happen. You can start anytime, but I think the big question is, do you have the bandwidth, the resources, and truly the expertise? Or are you better off responding to something in a couple of years once you have a little bit more education, a little bit more experience under you?
So when we talk about a portfolio or like a media kit, like what do people need to have in order to step in front of these people when they're starting to work on their PR? Is it something that is standard in the industry? Is it something that you recommend that people work on so they don't show up just saying with an email, maybe saying just, hey, I would like to be one of your experts? Like what kind of information they need to put together to present to the people they're going to pitch themselves for?
Media kits have changed so much in 20 years. I mean, when I was in school, it was a hard copy of something that you would mail out, like if you can imagine, right? And all of it just looks so different. So I tend to be from, and not everyone agrees with me, but I'll say from my side of it, I said these days, so much has changed, but so much has not. What has not changed is the fact that you want to make it as easy as possible on the journalist, the end. These guys are working practically 24 hours a day, always on a deadline, always looking for great content. There is no time for them, so they need it easy, but how you put it together now does look different. I've skipped, like, we're done with, in my book, the PDF, the thing that you put together and you send out to people. I'm done with that. I'm not done with PDFs. I'm done with that kind of PDF as media kit. What we tell people now is what you want to do over time is you really want to take your press page, whatever that page is where you start putting press on it, and really move it towards and transition to an online newsroom. And so an online newsroom, which is very popular with all the Fortune 500 brands, like you could just literally type in media room Coca-Cola, media room, online newsroom Target, and you can see at that upper echelon of what that looks like. But the thought is, what if you had a page dedicated on your site that not only shows your latest press wins, but also includes press contact, which is typically, I always suggest spend the $10 and just get an extra email that's media@yourcompany.com, but also the collateral. So all the collateral that you would share, Media Kit is meant to make the job of the editors and journalists easier, and by providing them and anticipating their needs, like the media needs. And so our what we typically say is then go ahead and put that on the website. So if you've got an online newsroom, some of your recent press, which is great, and then at the bottom, media resources. So it could be a place to download your logos, headshots with permission, photo credits, all of that. Short bio, longer bio, company profile, list of awards, company history. It depends on how far you need to get into it. But you need to ask yourself, it's no different than if you have a client come to your site, what's going to make it easy on them to start making that decision? I mean, maybe not right away because you want to talk with them. Well, move it to the media for a second. What's going to make it easier? What I would tell people too is to go ahead and on a quarterly basis, just do a quick run through of your website. I mean, there are plenty of other things people should be doing to look at their site. This is just the PR side, is just look for accuracy. Make sure that you have updated, if you're part of any associations, the updated leadership, updated, location, things like that. Because accuracy, it's not sexy, but it's going to be the number one thing with journalists.
Yeah, absolutely. Cannot be. How can you trust a source that doesn't even have accuracy on their own website? I like that.
We learned that, and accuracy could be as simple as just being outdated. I think everyone can sit here and listen and say, well, of course it's accurate. Well, it was accurate at some point, but I found during COVID, a lot of the top journalists, all over the New Associated Press, New York Times, sometimes they're calling you and they're going through and saying, okay, I just have to fact check. And then if you start seeing little things about your site that you just didn't mean to do any harm, but it was just a little bit off, it's really going to throw them off.
So, what metrics or maybe indicators that you primarily use to measure success in your PR campaigns?
It's so hard with measuring success. I talk about this almost every day. I always say PR is not a vending machine. Very rarely is someone going to get an inclusion in something and then it's going to drive a ton of press. Now, there are exceptions, a full write up in, some huge magazine, being on Oprah's list, like that's going to be a game changer. But for the most part, it's looking at the success realistically, and there's a few different things. It does tie back to your goals, right? Like what has to happen for this to be success. But typically with our folks, we're looking to increase brand awareness. So we're looking at a few things on top of that. I am not an SEO expert. I'll be the first to say that. But a lot of the online press, there's the benefit of those great backlinks. So if someone gets quoted in, brides.com, they get the links back, which is fantastic. And that helps them move them up on Google when paired with the right SEO strategy. So we look at the value of the links. We look at how much traffic comes from this. If you get some sort of feature and people are clicking on it, brings it to your site, hopefully you have Google Analytics set up so you can take a look at that. But it's also going to be, have we met a lot of these goals people are looking for? They're going to be folks we work with who say, our couples in particular look at Carrots and Cake. They look at Martha Stewart. They look at X, Y, and Z. And these guys want that as seen in. So we know we've done our job if they've been able to add to their press page, add to those logos as well to help them convert kind of future consumers. So it's a few different things. I never tell people to track sales based on that, but it's going to be different traffic, quality of links, things like that.
As a business and mindset coach myself, I'm on that thought leadership space. How do you help your clients really position themselves as a thought leader through PR? Because that might be a little bit more maybe complex or definitely different than, when you're talking about a specific skill, maybe?
Oh, it absolutely is. There's a strategy that just looks very different with that. When I'm a big believer that it takes a lot of strategy before you actually jump in and do the PR. And especially that's the case for thought leadership. When you have you say, I want to be a thought leader. I want to be an expert in something. I want to be known. I go back to, again, goals. I go back to, what are you an expert in? Truly, are you an expert in this? Have you done that? Like, it's not just experience. Is it training? Is it certifications? Is it like, what else is there to really show that you've done this? So once you've narrowed that down, and then to be able to go and say, in your space, are there people competing for that share of space? If someone says, I am a business consultant in photography, in planning, in creative entrepreneurship, well, who else is there? Let's get a lay of the land first, because it's not to say other people can't come in and compete, but let's be realistic about share of space. There are 6 people who do what I do anywhere. And you've got to look at like, well, where are these people and where am I and what makes the most sense? So you need to do the same for yourself. Once you've done that, you've got to ask yourself, especially if you want to be a thought leader within certain groups, right? Creatives, events, whatever people have decided, you've got to figure out what those audiences are. Are they listening to podcasts? Are there certain places online where they're looking for guest writing? Is it speaking engagement? So once you've kind of said, I'm an expert in this, I recognize these are the competitors in that kind of thought space, and then really narrow down, these are the places where I can leverage what I'm great at, what I know, and I can pitch myself to these places. That's where the magic happens. But thought leadership does look a little bit different. It's not always, I hate to say it, it's not always going to be sexy, right? You could be in a much smaller, but it's a trade publication that puts you in front of the right people. So it just comes in with a different mindset. It's all about educating at that level. I always tell thought leaders and aspiring thought leaders, no one's more than likely going to do a huge write up about why you are so great. Like that's not, but it's going to be about you and your education and building that trust.
Whole different world out there. So, what are some of the unique challenges that you face when you're handling PR for event professionals compared to other industries?
Well, with event professionals as a whole, there's a few things. I was like, how long do you have? I know, I'm just kidding. It's a very particular world. One of the biggest challenges is like 90% of the press is related to event submissions. Like, and that's hard because the people who benefit, it's photographers, planners, venues, florists. I would say maybe designers as well. But once you start looking at, it's like the DJs and transportation and hair and makeup won't benefit from those features. So you have to go in a different direction with that. Also, so many moving parts. Photographers, great. They want to submit, they own the copyright, beautiful. But what if the planner wants to get involved? What if the couple has something to say? Like that, there's so many moving parts. The accuracy of the vendors. I said I'm a florist and designer, but you only list me as a florist. Like there's a lot more moving parts than you may think. And then there's the people who benefit the most from it. I would say one of the bigger challenges too is managing that during the busy season. So I know it varies in the United States, but I think most can agree that a large part of the US from like April to early November tends to be very busy time, right, for weddings. And so that's when editors typically see fewer submissions. But so I'm always pushing people. I'm like, listen, I need your submissions. And I know you're busy. I did weddings for many years. I get it. But Like if we can get it now versus everybody submitting in December, January, like we're going to have more eyeballs on it. And so that's also a challenge that comes with it.
Very, very unique for sure. Can you describe maybe one of your most impactful PR campaigns and then maybe talk about one or two strategies that you employ to achieve that success? We don't want to give all your secrets out,
Oh,
but
of course.
couple
I don't
things.
mind. I'm a bit of an oversharer when it comes to that. Well, I look back at COVID. I'm gonna do a couple of them if that's okay.
Mhm.
Real quick, I'll say COVID on that side because that fell in our laps. That wasn't a strategy. And I think having the mindset that we're just going to give and give and give. I'll never forget. I sat down with my team virtually, of course. It was like my sunroom, like where I could get away from my family and like talk to them and said, we're just going to give and give and give until we've literally run out and then we're going to keep going. And so it was all about educating and being that guiding light. And so we really had to shift mindset very quickly and say to ourselves, how can we do this in a way that everyone knows we're readily available 24 hours a day? Like I'm available to, don't do that to your team, but me. And that was such I hate to say it, but 100 features in 60 days is a wild amount of press. And I mean, I hate to call that successful because I wish it had never happened too, right? None of us wanted COVID to happen. But that's one side of it where it was the mentality of just giving. It's that give mentality. I'm just going to give education, be that guiding light. And there were some real standout people from that time period throughout that first year. Then Omicron came where they really rose to the challenge. But if we want to be more specific about a PR campaigns, let's have a more fun example, if I may. Is one of the fun campaigns I like to talk about, and we were really honored by the awards we won for this. Believe it or not, talk about totally different. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding, which we had nothing to do with. Let me be clear before people are like, "Ooh, I'm really tuning in now." It's like, no, they don't know us at all. Let me be clear. But I'll never forget the Monday after was it 2017? 2017, 2018. It was Thanksgiving. I dared to take that Thursday through Friday off and I sat down at like 5:30 in the morning on that Monday to kind of catch up. And it said he was engaged. And I thought, oh no. Like that's great for him. That's going to be nuts for us. So typically royals have a very short turnaround time from engagement to actual wedding. And I had been around for the Kate Middleton wedding. We had Good Morning America at my house doing a whole video on us having like a viewing party. It was wild. So what we did was, and this was one of my most fun campaigns to date. So we moved some money around and we said, you know what? We need writers to know about us. We need writers. So what we did is we did like we dropped everything and we focused on writers who are typically in the wedding space who more than likely would cover Prince Harry's wedding, which was everywhere for 5 months. I mean, it was just everywhere, which I was grateful for, right? To have all that coverage. And so we created these boxes. We took some money and we set aside, we had our designer put together When Harry Met Meghan. And when you open it, it was all of these designed to our colors. And it was all these resources and amidst some really fun stuff. We had fascinators in it. We had British candy. We had party pieces, which is Kate Middleton's family, like party store. We had to ship it to Ireland, and then my friend Johanna sent it here because it couldn't come to America. Like it wouldn't come direct to America, but it was like all this like party stuff from their store. And then what it was, hey, this wedding's coming up. We want you prepared. So we have this fun stuff, but then we had these like little cards that you could stick in your pocket where it was like royal wedding facts. And then we did the history of the gowns. So it was literally like everything you needed to know going into this. It went out, we sent them out to about 50 writers. And there are people, what is it, 7 years later now, who we still work with as a result of that. So the longevity of creating these campaigns, it was so much fun. It recognized these writers were not only covering, but they would probably stay with us after and keep working with us. I mean, I was working with someone 2 business days ago who we started connected during that wedding. So that was one of our favorites. And it was just the idea of being creative, fun, still doing something in mail, even though I'm all about the online stuff, and asking what's going to be a bit of a surprise and delight campaign that's going to catch the interest of the journalist. So the pandemic was awful, but had a lot of press come with it. I like talking about the royal wedding because that was a time of true creativity.
Yeah, there's something about getting something in the mail and opening that box that we all still love
A
in the
hundred
digital
percent.
area. I think it's a little bit more impersonal, even though it's a box coming to your door. There's not necessarily a person there, but somebody took the time to actually put something together and go to the post office and mail something to you. To me, that means a lot. I send things to my clients as well when they book us because I know that it's fun. It's just a little, there's nothing's going to change their life, but they're going to remember that little act of kindness forever. just part of the client experience. And you're treating those writers and, obviously your media contacts, that they are your clients. They're the people, they're part of your client, network. So treating them just as the same as you would treat a PR client that's hiring you to connect with them. If you don't have that side of your business, you don't have a business. So
Yeah, 100%.
very important client experience at the end of the day. It serves all of us. So what are the trends that you're seeing kind of coming up in PR in the event industry, or maybe just in general, that you think businesses should be prepared for coming up?
I think all eyes are on Peter Shankman right now in terms of, having started Haro all those years ago and now turned into something called Hero. Again, help every reporter out. You just Google, it'll pop up. So the idea of going back to the basics of journalists have needs for articles they're already working on, and then there's a free forum where you can go and actually, these journalists share, and then you can jump in where you see fit. So it'd be interesting if going back to the basics, how that works. In addition, journalists are also doing something called Substacks, as we talked about a little bit too, and that is where they will come in and do these general emails where they talk about like their travels and what they're up to and all those things, and then they'll talk about their least recent press, but then also their editorial requests as well. And so to be able to connect with them in that sort of way has just been a really great humanization of the editorial relationship, if that makes sense. I think if we're looking at the event space as well, what's going to be very interesting on that side is, the continued rise of pay to play. So the idea of, you're advertised somewhere and they're only going to take submissions from advertisers. How much, which I'm not against at all. The question is, how much is that being shared ahead of time? How is that being put out there in a way that people can look at it and say, can they tell the difference between something that's paid and not? Does it matter that they can tell the difference or not as well?
I like that. Just being aware of what's coming and working on how to prepare yourself and your company to best adapt to that. What is the main message that you want to leave to our audience today?
I would tell your audience, I know it easier said than done. Don't be intimidated by PR. I'm gonna quote a Peloton instructor who said, "Forward is forward. Forward is forward, little bits at a time." So to know that, yes, it sounds overwhelming. I sit here and I talk about all the things, and it's like, okay, I need goals, but the fact is, PR at the end of the day is not brain surgery. It's just not. I mean, is it difficult and challenging? Yes, in its own ways. But you yourself, and speaking to your audience, can truly represent themselves. Get a hold of your goals and start asking yourself, where would you like to see yourself? What would make that successful? And then just start chipping away at it. It's a long game. There's not anybody, very rarely do we see someone featured overnight in Martha Stewart after just signing with us. It takes time. So I would say, don't be intimidated. Just start somewhere.
Thank you. I love that. So, Megan, where can people find you if they want to work with you, utilize your services, and learn more from you?
They can find me over at ofdconsulting.com. That's my website, best place to find me. Also Instagram, Consulting as well.
Perfect. We'll link all of that for you guys. Thank you so much for being with us, Megan, and sharing all these amazing, amazing insights. I feel like there's a lot that people can take on now and get started on their PR plan from the tips that you gave us. So I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Perfect. We'll see you guys next week for another episode of the Accidental CEO podcast. Bye. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Accidental CEO podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us in the world where creativity and business strategy collide. I am Nada Salvatore, thrilled to have shared this time with you. Remember, every episode is a step closer to mastering the art of being an accidental CEO. So don't miss out. Hit subscribe, drop us a sweet review, and spread the word to your creative tribe. Your next big breakthrough could be just one episode away. Join us next time for more insights, laughs, and actionable tips. Keep pushing boundaries, dreaming big, and embracing the beautiful chaos of entrepreneurship. Here's to make magic happen in your business and beyond.